Hello everyone, welcome back. Joshua here. In today's video, what I want to talk about is value and quality. How we can get to a place where we actually have imbued our life with the types of values that we wish to have. Stay tuned. So getting started, I want to admit that this topic has been a difficult one for me. To figure out how to define what a value is no small task. Towards that end, what I've done for a long time is I've used the word value and quality as synonyms, but I actually want to differentiate those two. So, you know me, I always like to start with some basic definitions so we know what we're talking about here. When I looked up the word value, the main definition that popped up is worth. So, when you think of something that has value, you may think of cars or houses or money even. You think of something that means something to you. So pulling back from that to a more psychological definition, value is about what it is that you find important and significant in your life. Largely, we express our value through our time, our attention, our money, and most especially what it is that we nurture. Now here's going to be a difficult thing to wrap your head around. Whatever we do, we value. Now this is kind of tough when we start looking at those habits that don't serve our best interests. When we maybe use drugs or alcohol, when we overeat, when we choose not to exercise, when we sleep in rather than get up like we said we were going to do, on and on. Where we get stuck is we don't see those type of behaviors as value-filled. We in fact oftentimes use those examples of our life to prove how much we suck. It's really a bad process. So what I want you to start doing is to pull back from that process of condemning yourself and start looking at what value you might actually you're trying to get from those activities. So I'll give you an example based on substance abuse counseling that I've done quite a bit. I've tried to talk to people and teach people that inside their addiction, they're actually valuing some very nice, wholesome things. So, on the surface, there's the use of the drugs or the alcohol that might be interfering with their life. Underneath that, in some really quick discussion and discovery, what you find out is that most everyone values relaxation, socializing, being able to get out of their worrisome head, and a lot of other things of that nature. So notice the value is hidden underneath the habit that's not working for them. The point is those behaviors still give them some facsimile of that value. Being someone that used to drink heavily, a former alcoholic, and used to do lots of drugs back in the day, I know for a fact that that stuff worked. For this amount of time though. So it worked, it just wasn't sustainable. And so that's what's happening in our lives is very oftentimes two things. One, we don't really necessarily know unequivocally what that value is, and then we're doing some behavior that's not sustainable towards getting ourselves that value. All right? Now I want to move on to quality. Quality is yet another one of those kind of weird esoteric words or ephemeral words that are hard to define. Just recently, how I've been focusing on the word quality is in relation to and distinction to quantity. So we live in a world, especially us Americans, in which quantity is king. More this, more that, more whatever means better. Now, unfortunately, more very oftentimes precludes the ability to have quality. And so what I mean here by quality is attention to detail and enjoyment of the process. In Zen Buddhism teaches us, and I love this phrase, when you're chopping wood, chop wood. When you're carrying water, carry water. It suggests a quality-laden life through being present-centered. When our focus is on quantity, what we tend to do is to skip over the process of the very thing we're wanting to have. So an example might be, we say we value money. All right, so we value money. That looks like then potentially working more. Now, as we work more and more and the quantity of our time and energy and dedication to the job increases, our enjoyment for the job decreases. You would not believe how many folks I speak to that are in jobs that kill them physically, emotionally, spiritually. It just kills them because what they're shooting for is the product. The product happens to be, in this sense, money. It might also lead to something like cars or security. But the problem is in that process of focusing on more and more, the quality of the experience goes missing. So now I want to do is bridge value and quality together. So remember, value comes in the form of expressing significance and importance through time, through attention, through money, through nurturance. Quality is expressed through that present-centered awareness of what it is that you're doing. When you put these two concepts together, what you have is a present-centered person who is fully aware of the value that they're wishing to instill in that present moment. So now I want to talk to you about the activity that you can start working on. I just call it simply the quality or the values exercise. You'll need a pen and paper for this. So now that you've got your pen and paper, on one side of the page, what I want you to do is I want you to write down some values you wish to have in your life. And again, I want you to think of words that strike some sort of resonance in you. And think adjectives as well. Think things like patience or kindness or perseverance, words that very oftentimes don't get defined behaviorally. So that's step 2. You come up with however many values you wish to work on. I encourage you to not start with any more than like 3 or 4 or 5. On the opposite side of the page, what I want you to do is come up with 2 behavioral definitions of the word. So I'll give you an example. So let's say the quality or the value is kindness. On the other side of the page, what I want you to do is come up with the behavior that proves to you that you're being kind. Now, one example of being kind that I oftentimes give to myself is that when I've made a mistake, I slow down and I let myself feel the emotion of guilt. Now, that's a very interesting concept, to let yourself feel something that is normally labeled as bad as representing kindness. Now, for me, the reason this represents kindness is I allow myself to access what it is I'm actually valuing. See, I've kind of tricked you here in this little cycle. Emotional intelligence, then, is a very huge value of mine. Inside the process of feeling an emotion, it points you back to the value that you're attempting to express in your life. So back to it. Kindness for me is slowing down and feeling the emotion. The other way that I can express kindness is when I allow someone else to, when I allow myself to understand where someone else is coming from. So rather than knee-jerk condemn them for whatever behavior they might do or whatever I think they're doing, I ask. So notice how both of those are connected and what they have in common. So the first expression of kindness is towards myself, and it's allowing me to feel fully what it is I'm feeling so I can connect back to the belief that the value that was missing. And that second one is something I can give to someone else. And that is simply inquiring. So now I want to move on from that activity and have you look at what I want really to have going on with all of these values and qualities, is to learn to balance giving and receiving. So with the activity, if you come up with at least 2 behavioral definitions, then what you can do is you can come up with one behavioral definition that's solely for yourself and another one that allows you to give to the other person. Now this is really important for 2 types of folks, and you can kind of split folks down the middle here. So I'm in the camp of really needing to focus on giving to others, hence these videos. For me, I have a tendency to give to myself first and then to the other person second. So it's important for me to come up with the behaviors that prove to me that I'm giving the value to someone else. Kindness, patience, a listening ear. The other camp are those that have a tendency to give to others first and very oftentimes not towards themselves. This can lead to a sense of obligation, a sense of resentment and frustration, and then stuckness. So depending on your camp, you really need to monitor whether you need to really focus on giving that attribute and that quality to the outside world or towards yourself. And that's why it's a good process to come up with those two definitions that have one for each. So one final point here is that when we come up with these behavioral definitions, we need to come up with these goals that are measurable and observable. So one more example. I constantly work on having patience in my life. So if my idea of patience is to always be fill in the blank, that word always precludes me from probably being patient like I want to be. There are going to be times when I slip up. My example I always give to clients is I slip up in traffic sometimes and I get really frustrated in traffic. I lose my patience. Now, if my definition says I must always be patient, meaning always be someone who is calm and drives appropriately, and then I mess up, there's a very good chance I'm going to be angry at myself and beat myself up. This is where we get stuck. We're not setting the bar to an appropriate level. So one thing I might say to myself is, just this morning in my morning commute, I want to be someone who does not scream at someone for doing something that I think is stupid. Now, that's for me about a 20-minute drive. Someone else might have an hour drive. Point is you set the bar to something that you can measurably do. You set it just low enough that it's easily reachable, but just high enough that it's a challenge. Now, of course, I've graduated to the point that I can commute to work and back from work and be chill. But I have to constantly remind myself, hey, that's my goal. That's a value I wish to have. The other thing that keeps us stuck, so the first one is not having a measurable and doable goal. The other one is when it's too rigid. I've found that having a too rigid goal oftentimes keeps us either in a place of shame because we don't reach that goal because it's just not something that's even attainable, or it keeps us procrastinating. Very interestingly, I've talked to clients about how they've got such a high value goal that they never wind up making it happen because they don't believe they can be successful. So where I find this oftentimes is the case is when people want to make big changes in their life. They want to quit smoking, they want to quit drinking, they want to get in better physical shape, they want to increase their emotional intelligence, and they say, well, I must always be kind and patient, or I must lose 50 pounds by the end of the month, or some ridiculous statement that no one could possibly attain. In that rigid goal setting, there's no way to attain any sort of sense of superiority and mastery. And that's really what we're shooting for. So the goal here is to be kind to yourself in this process and to be patient to yourself in this process. If you can keep going back to what it is that you wrote down, you can assess whether or not those goals were attainable, whether they were something that fit your lifestyle. For example, if you're just starting out with eating properly and exercising, you might come up with a goal that says, I want to be healthy. The behavioral definition is, I want to do 5 push-ups this morning and I want to eat a salad for lunch. That's measurable and doable. That's my encouragement to you, is to do this on a regular basis. And then as you're setting these goals, as you're reaching these values and you get this sense of mastery, then what you have naturally is you have more quality in your life. Because in any given moment, what your focus is on in the moment is creating that value, rather than focusing on the future and the product that you think you're supposed to get to prove to yourself that you're good. Staying focused in the present moment is always about being connected to your body, being aware of what your goal is in the present moment, and putting all of your love and attention in the here and now. As you practice this, you will get better with it. Take care.